Hi, everyone. Welcome to an exciting episode of CRO Wisdom. I'm delighted to have today with us an individual who has very deep experience in third party risk management across a number of financial services company. Today, we have Olga Baldwin, who is the lead of third party risk management at Stonex. And prior to that, she has had third party risk management roles at Sterling National Bank, Webster, Bank of China, and others. It's important, as we always say, that our episode here are the views of our speakers. They are not the views of the company that they are at, whether they are past or present or the present company. Olga, welcome to the episode.
Thank you. Thank you, Atul, for having me. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, Olga, you have such deep experience in third party risk management, but first, let's start with your personal journey. How did you end up in risk? Tell us about that.
It's a great question, right? I guess it meant to be. So when I finished college, I was looking for like an entry level job, and it was hard, right? We all remember those first interviews and first steps. Um, so I ended up in a small private company that was, they were like brokers, and they were selling airline flights. So it's a very interesting job. My role was called like a project manager, business analyst. I was doing a lot of things there, but majority of my time I spent on analyzing airline documents, looking at airplane certificates, financial
Mhm.
documentation of companies, and things of that nature. And I remember we needed to hire one more person because the company had a tremendous growth, and we were constantly doing process improvement, figuring out how we're going to manage that. So we had a lot of opportunities there, like to improve the process, make things faster and more efficient. Um, and then we were hiring. We're like, how do we call this role? Is it business analyst? No, like, and it was like private company, so it wasn't like
Right.
they were not looking for like slides or anything. They just wanted like, okay, get to business. So and then when I finished my MBA and I was doing my resume, I had some of my friends take a look at it. I listed everything I did. So I still posted my role like on the resume as a business analyst, project manager. And then one day a recruiter called me, and they're like, your skill set is a perfect field for this role of, in for the analyst in third party risk management area. And when I joined the team, there was a big team of 36 people, and the skill set that I grew over in that um, private industry company, I it turned out like I was fully skilled to do third party risk management because I knew how to request the documents, what to look for,
Right.
how to look at financial documents, and all this stuff. And ever since knew that this is third party risk management, right? And in that team that I joined, I've learned a lot of how to like structure it, what is risk, what's needed to be done, like how to build a program, what documentation is needed. So all the skill set that I developed
Right.
in the airline industry was completely transferable into the, it was insurance company actually. So when I joined, so and then I learned how to do the training and experience the full growth of third-party risk management on a global level. So,
Right.
so that was very exciting, and then that's how my journey started. So,
Yeah. That's really interesting because I think that's often I see most common. It's not that they were trained in risk management, but they had strong analytical skills and then kind of an interest in having almost like this investigative kind of thinking to it. And it looks like you did that. Let's
yeah.
let's move to trends, Olga. So if you when you think about trends in the market and you see how those trends are impacting risk leaders, talk about what you're seeing in terms of the impact of the role, the budget, or what senior leadership is asking of risk leaders.
Yeah, well, the trends, right? So the latest and greatest is AI, of course. So it's been uh, it was interesting because 2 years ago I was at the conference and nobody talked about it. And last year around April, I went to the third party risk management conference, and everybody was talking about AI. So like in January, nobody talked about it, and in April, we all talked about it, how it needs to be trained and how we can use it and what are the dangers. So, and ever since that, like it evolved, right? So it's everybody is trying to see how we can use AI and what we need to do with it. So, and of course, there is increased cost around it, right? Because there is the need for AI, like to use internally, how we use it, but then we need to pay to train it, we need to
Yeah.
pay to monitor it, and so
Yeah.
on. So I guess this one is the biggest from third-party risk management perspective, but that doesn't mean that all other areas, right, are suffering. So the area around fourth parties or end parties
Yeah.
management is
Yeah.
also important and growing, and I know there's a lot more attention now from regulators on those areas, because these are the weakest points
Yeah.
sometimes in
Yeah.
the service or product that's provided to the organization. So that's still important, and that still requires more resources. So budgets increase because if we need to increase the monitoring of those, right, we need to
Yeah.
increase either the resources from people perspective or engage tools, which also
Yeah.
brings additional cost to the organization. But sometimes it's worth it, well, always worth it, right? Because you want to monitor that and
Yeah.
make sure you prevent any issues that can your force or end parties can bring. And the other area, still, it's important, right? The ESG, we're still trying to see how to build it into third-party risk management programs, and it's evolving, and it's getting more and more attention. So if I have to pick three, right, and from all areas, right, we need support from senior management always, right? It is a regulatory guidance that the board is responsible for third-party
Yeah.
risk management,
Yeah.
and of course, the support and funding is also important, so it can be executed the way it's supposed to be, in line with the risk appetite of the organization.
Yeah, I really like the way you frame it because you've identified the big issues, but you also are very conscious of the fact that, hey, what value does it drive for the company and what does it cost, right? So you're
Yeah,
one of those risk managers that think from a business outcomes perspective. That was good to hear that.
thank you.
So Olga, let's talk about some of the big pain points that organizations have, like assessments as an example, right? So when you're onboarding a third party or when you're doing a renewal or possibly when they've had an issue, often companies will do these assessments. They are lengthy. They keep getting bigger as new areas come in. Like
Mhm.
cyber added a lot. AI is now adding to that. What are some of the approaches you are taking to either reduce the time of the assessments and or cost of the assessments?
Yeah, that's a challenging question, right? Like fully loaded, what to do with it. And I'm sure every peer in third-party risk management is trying to solve for that, right? Because if you're doing a good job, you have less budget, and vice versa, right? So you want to find that middle ground where you have enough budget to do enough monitoring, right? And you can always do more because uh, it's essential and it's getting more and more important. But like engage in AI tools, right, is important because with the increased requirements, there's new regulations that came recently, right? There's new regulations coming out around AI. So we need to get more tools that can help us to do that. And as companies grow, they get more third parties in, so we need to make sure we find those resources. There is a bunch of AI tools that are evolving on the market where they can pre-populate the responses during assessment on third party side, or where there is a response required from a third party. There are tools that are evolving as well where you can utilize them to provide responses to the and numerous questionnaires that
Yeah.
third-party risk management requires on the other side. So there's tools evolving on both sides, and investment in those tools probably will bring things to more standardized approach, right? Like by us connecting, like in third-party risk management area, we kind of bring up best practices, and those tools kind of help us to streamline those processes and standardize the questionnaires. Um, like
Yeah.
we have SIG questionnaire, but there's a number of other questionnaires that are evolving as well. Uh, but they pretty much, the SIG is
Yeah.
considered, one of the biggest ones that a lot of peers are utilizing. So yeah, so That's probably the most important piece, utilizing AI technology platforms that are available to see how we can streamline and automate the processes as much as we can.
Yeah. No, I think that was good, right? You're saying,
Mhm.
hey, standardized questionnaires, tools that auto-populate the assessments, but also monitoring tools. I think Olga is very consistent with some of the leaders that I'm seeing in financial services do that. Follow on to that, you actually talked about nth party and ESG risk.
Mhm.
Interestingly, often when I'm talking to organization, there's a high focus on financial and cyber. You just added nth party and ESG, totally makes sense because I see risk as
Mhm.
full spectrum. What are some of the other risk areas that you are looking at to make sure that you're getting a full spectrum view of all risk regarding third parties?
Yeah, that's a great question because um, EML area is very important, right? Because we see the political environment changing, and we have to take action. And there are days where the action is required immediately, right? If sanctions are introduced or additional people are added on PEPs lists, so that's important. That's important to make sure that we align to the best practices and monitor them, preferably on daily basis if it's possible. Given the availability of the tools, I'm always for doing daily monitoring. That's the most efficient. So model risk is also important to conduct
Yeah,
if it's relevant to the service or product provided. Financial that you mentioned, I mean, cyber risk is of course by all means, right? But like financial risk that you mentioned is also very important, especially in the areas of fintech organizations,
yeah,
crypto startups. Um, those ones are sometimes really good to engage, but how do you manage the risk, right? They come to you with a blank page, they don't have yet a set of good controls, or they just evolve and they come to you with a great idea. So it is important to figure out what is your risk appetite, how much risk the company wants to take to engage with the third party. And then the challenge is to determine, looking at their financials, are they really going to be successful? Do they have enough venture capital,
right.
or do they have
Yeah,
enough incoming capital from other areas, right? Other investors, and do we want to
yeah,
take any collateral and things of that nature? So these are the things that I've seen evolved, and they, depending on the strategy the company picks, they could be very pivotal, right? Because
yeah,
that's the risk part, right? We have to point out, okay, if you engage with this company, there's a high chance to fail, right? Because of
yeah,
this, and this. And financials are usually a great indicator in many ways. But with the startups and fintechs
yeah.
and all those new organizations, it is important to pick that
So, Olga, you just
limit.
talked about a number of different risks, right? Risk categories like ESG, nth party, geopolitical, financial,
Mhm.
cyber, and others. Often we see in organizations either this is done in silos. So compliance will be looking at compliance,
Mhm.
procurement might look at financial, the CISO organizations looking at cyber, and third party risk might have some of it. What's your thought on integrating these multiple sources, or like how do you make sure you're getting a full spectrum view even though some of this data information may be siloed?
Yeah, so I've experienced that. I know exactly what you're talking about. So there are different types of third party risk management models that you can build. So what you just described is the model, like, is silent, right? So like
Yeah,
um, so there is a decentralized model that I like to build, where you have a small third party risk team and all your subject matter experts are located in the dedicated teams, right? So compliance resources that do third-party risk management reviews are located in compliance. EML located in EML teams, right? So it's decentralized, where third-party risk management doesn't have experts in any of the areas, but we all connected, right? So the reviews are pushed out of the third-party risk management program, and then the review results are received. In this way, there is a connection. Um, there is a centralized model where you hire those resources internally in third-party risk management, but it creates silos and disconnect between the actual team that's doing the work on the ground, right? So,
Yeah.
so we don't
Yeah.
want that. We want to make sure that they continuously talk. So the reporting line of compliance experts should be in compliance, right? Because then we execute exactly the way we want, and especially important in cyber area, information security, because that area they know how your platforms work, like how your network works, what requirements you have, what controls you can implement to mitigate certain issues, right? So it is, that's how I prefer to build the third
Yeah.
party risk management program. But there's also
Yeah.
other models, right, where you can engage managed service that creates similar challenges, because then it's
Right.
completely outsourced and sometimes offshore somewhere, right? Which is also good in certain ways, right? So you have to pick what's important for the company at that stage when you are, right? So, but
Yeah.
that's my opinion.
Right. No, that totally makes sense. I think you've described, you know, three different models in a sense in terms of how you might achieve that integration: a decentralized, a centralized, and managed service. That makes sense. And one has to recognize what's right for the corporation, the culture of the company. So, Olga, we talked about a lot of risks. We talked about assessments. We talked about kind of org models. One of the things we're starting to see, of course, is there's a greater increase in continuous monitoring. I read a survey that MasterCard Risk Recon recently did regarding assessments, and they talked about how only 4% of the organizations had trust in these assessments because most of them are filled by the suppliers. There's no way to verify them. So more and more companies we're noticing are moving to continuous monitoring of cyber, financial, and all of the risk types. What are your thoughts on this movement to continuous monitoring, and what should companies be thinking about to make sure they're successful if they do that?
Well, yeah, that's important, right? So there is the term like used in parallel, ongoing monitoring or continuous monitoring. So utilizing the available tools, right, is important. Connecting them to third-party risk management, getting the holistic view of all areas is a great approach, because it gives you signs of the early distress, where you can raise hand and say, hey, you have to take a look at this company closely. um, the other good part of continuous monitoring is also doing performance management, where you determine like how the company is doing as they meet in SLAs,
Yeah,
right? So coupled with, like, let's say if you see this company is not doing well on the performance monitoring piece, and if you do it every 3 months, and then you look at their indicators on the monitoring tools like financial monitoring, and then if you utilize any cybersecurity monitoring tools, you would see uh, maybe correlation in those. Or you can even reach out to the company and say, hey, your financials are like kind of deteriorating,
right.
the SLAs are not being met, are you guys addressing this, what is your mitigating plan, right? So it gives you tools to provide the early response, right?
Yeah.
So it is essential. And I mean, the more we evolve in third-party risk management, the more we need to engage those tools that can give you those early warning signs.
So Olga, that's been a good discussion regarding kind of risk types, how to manage it, maybe the evolution of some of the risk types. One of the things that I often hear from business leaders, these are outside of risk, is how procurement or risk can be a detriment to the business. And what they mean by that is, hey, it's taking them too long to do the assessment, right? So think about like how do we help business leaders, but more importantly, our risk organizations rethink risk, and how do you think risk leaders like you can deliver more value to the business? How can you help drive revenue? How do you think one can do that?
Yeah, that's also another great question, right? And it's very hard to resolve, because no matter how hard we try, we still create that, you know, for the lack of better term, kind of a bottleneck, right? Sometimes, because
Yeah,
somebody
yeah,
wants to sign the contract today, and with the right processes in place, it might take a while, depending on the level of risk of the organization. So it is essential to pick the right risk appetite for organization and execute third-party risk management in line with those processes and in line with that appetite, um, as well, and to pick the right amount of the resources. Right, there is I like, you don't drive the revenue, but you decrease the cost, right? Like if your
Yeah,
risk appetite is more, then you have to do, you know, less in certain area and more in the other area. So how much more do you want to do? That's your risk appetite, right? Do you want to review all, let's say you have 100 third parties, do you want to review all 100, or do you want to do risk-based approach and pick like your tiers, right? Like one is very critical, one is high, and these three are medium. We'll review them every 2 years, right? So how you build your inherent risk questionnaire will predetermine how many reviews and how frequently you will need to do. But the same third party can be different, can expose different organizations to different level of risk, and all organizations have different risk appetite. So the amount of money they will spend on reviewing and monitoring those third parties is different as well, and that's
yeah.
what drives the costs, right? So you can have less analysts to do less work because your risk appetite is more. So but that's driven by each organization. So but that's where
Do you
the cost
do,
savings are.
are you seeing like the continuous monitoring tools kind of speed up your due diligence process, and that helps you kind of get through that due diligence faster?
uh in many ways, yes, if you find the right tools that, in line with the requirements from your subject matter experts, right? So if your subject matter experts think that this is enough that the tool gives you, then it should be your risk
Right,
appetite, right?
right.
So I've been part of a few organizations, and I've seen where one organization requires 3 documents and the other one wants to see 5, right? So it's just a high level example, but
Right.
you understand what I'm trying to say, right? If one
Yeah.
organization thinks that this tool is monitoring and we are happy to see those results and we are okay with moving forward with this, the other organization may say, hey, well, we've seen this fail if it has the same score.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
want to ask 3 documents, right? Which prolongs the process of reviews. So
So
I
with
don't know if I
all
answered your question.
no, no, I think you did. I think
Mm,
I think you're taking two different approaches. One is to say, hey,
mm,
can we rethink inherent risk as such, right? So that we
mhm.
know, like, is this really important anymore? And second, of course, is leveraging intelligence and data to be able to do that. Let's.
Yeah.
Where do you think this is going? Like, if you think about the future of risk management, where do you think this is going? Like, what do you see changing in the near future or evolving in the near future? I know you talked a little bit about that already when you talked about
Mm,
the impact of AI and others, but
mhm.
anything else you want to add there before I talk to you about kind of how should you let young professionals think about this? But let's talk about the
Yeah.
future first.
Yeah, well, the future, right? I don't have the crystal ball, but I can guess that we will train AI more and more, and it will
Yeah,
help us, right? The more we invest now, of not even like financially invest, but like our time, documentation,
yeah,
leverage processes, and the more we train those AI tools in the right way, then we will develop better
yeah,
tools in the future, because it takes like a while and a lot of data is required to train AI tools in the correct way. And I think as we evolve together, like in the third party risk management area, then we will get there eventually where we will have
yeah,
the right tools to do it. So
yeah. And I think one has to recognize is the best way to educate, inform, make these tools better is with subject matter experts like you.
thank you. Appreciate
So
it.
Olga, it's very clear that you have a deep understanding of third-party risks. You understand different models. So what resources do you rely on to be a better risk professional?
So the most important is continuously learning, right? Because there's best practices, and then continuously learning from my peers to hear what issues they came across, how they resolved them, or if there's new like we talked about AI, right? Like we've
Yeah.
discussed it at the conference. I heard it. I came back to the organization I've been part of. I said, hey, this is what I heard. Can we develop like AI policy, right? Can we train our employees on this? So you hear things from peers and you try to learn. And I think the more I grow in the area, the more I'm trying to learn, because I feel like there's always room to grow and learn
Yeah.
more, and figure out new ways to do things more efficiently. And the other thing is I always try to give back, right? So just to share my knowledge, so together we can execute best practices.
Yeah.
Because I've been in situations where I would be risk assessing a third party and they're like, yeah, but so and so never asked for this. um, by so and so I mean the other organization, right? And I'm saying, well, this is kind of regulatory requirement, and I'm surprised they didn't ask
Yeah.
you for this, right? So we want to share this knowledge, to make sure that the situations occur less and less. And that's what I'm seeing lately, right? Because often you just receive the package and everything's already
Yeah.
there, and
Yeah.
that means that organizations on the other end evolve and learn it as well. um, so so that's pretty much, I guess, the best way, I guess, to learn, like
Yeah.
from peers. I attend a number of webinars, try to chat with people in different industries to see how they do it. And yeah, so I think that's a great way to learn and continue growing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, this is perfect example where peer organizations, like whether it's organizations like Shared Assessments, TPRA, and others, or groups like Risk Board as such, I think those are very valuable resources. I think that's already good advice. But for my final question, which is, as more and more attention is being put on risk, both young professionals, but also professionals, maybe even later in their career, are saying, hey, maybe risk can be my profession, risk can be my career. What advice would you have for them in terms of how should you think about so that they can build a good career, a long career in risk management?
It's a great question, right? I guess it's similar, right? Try to learn every day, build your network, talk to the peers, see if that's something you want or like to do, right? Because there's different areas in the in the organization where a person can grow. So risk is one of them, and I guess you really have to think risk, right? So see and understand if that's what you like. And then if you do, then try to learn from peers, and again from the conferences, from webinars. Try to talk to somebody who already does risk in your organization and connect, and see if that's the area of your interest, right?
Yeah,
So because you have to think risk.
yeah. Ask a lot of questions,
Yes.
right? Well, Olga, I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your knowledge, your experience, your wisdom with our attendees. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Atul. I really appreciate being here. Appreciate the time, and hopefully it was helpful to the
Yeah,
audience.
absolutely, Olga. Your wisdom was very helpful to the audience. Episodes as such as this are available on YouTube at the channel Peer Wisdom. And also, please feel free to share who you would like as our next expert on these episodes. Thank you again, and Olga, thank you, and have a great rest of the week.